So as the woman, I am now in kind of nesting and caretaking mode. But it's like, I need to be able to focus on this and put all of my energy and all of my love and my time into this. And I need to know that I'm safe to do that. So I need to know that I can let my guard down. I need to know that you'll maybe take care of the homestead, right? Like you've got it. I know that you've got it. I need to know that I can put all my energy here and that that's not going to somehow cause some kind of strain or issue or rift with you.
Vanessa, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you, Ryan, for having me.
I've been looking forward to this conversation because, you and I have had some email exchanges, but I think that men really do have a desire to serve the women in their lives. And I think oftentimes our brashness, our toughness, our demeanor is maybe misinterpreted by women. Generally, I'm speaking in broad generalities. And I think it creates problems between men and women. And conversely, I think that women generally want to serve the men in their lives in their way. And it is misinterpreted and misconstrued by us as men. So I think this will be a powerful discussion in how we can start having the conversations about what women mean when they say certain things, what men mean, how they show up, how they could show up better, etc.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think as somebody who works with couples a lot, my number one priority in that work is to help people understand each other, right? And so I think that's kind of what you're seeing and what I'm seeing is like we're both kind of saying the same thing, but it's being misinterpreted a lot of times.
Why do you think that is generally? Is it because we speak a different language, so to speak, or is it because there is conflict that's very difficult to resolve between what women think they should be doing and what men think they should be doing and what the sexes think the others should be doing?
I think it's all of the above. I mean, I think I see it so often where, unfortunately, by the time couples come to me, there's already many layers of conflict and resentment to kind of work through, first and foremost, before anybody can be heard. But I think also like socially, unfortunately, we've got ourselves into like these corners where society has got us thinking like, okay, I have to fit into this blueprint and you need to fit into this blueprint. And if I don't fit into that blueprint, something's wrong with me. And so we're all kind of walking around robotic, trying to like tick off boxes and be a good woman and be a good man, right? And many times when we're like in those roles, we're missing the human, the very real human that's across from us.
It's interesting that you bring it up, and I partially agree with that, but I also know that the roles, so to speak, if that's the term we're going to use, have served us for thousands and thousands of years as a species. I was actually doing a little research before you and I jumped on the podcast, and what I found is that there's a lot of studies that suggest that women are unhappier than they've been over the past several decades, even though access to opportunity and financial prosperity and options to be in the workforce or options to be at home. It's interesting that women's happiness is down. And from what I saw and what I could see is that men's happiness has either plateaued or even in some studies has shown that it's increased, which is kind of an interesting. Have you seen these studies and do you agree with that?
I've seen the one you talked about with women for sure. And I've seen it in the research and I've seen it in my own practice. I would say that what I've seen in my own practice is a blend, I suppose, with men plateauing for sure. I've seen that. And when I've seen them get happier, I think is when they've done some of this interpersonal and kind of looking inside the self kind of work. That's when I've seen them kind of increase in happiness, and I've seen them decrease when they don't in my practice, at least.
I mean, I can understand that. I've heard, I'm not familiar with it, but I'm not deeply familiar with it, I should say, is Jung's work on shadow work. And I think that's a big movement amongst men currently. And that might just be because I'm in the world of men's self-development that I see it more and more.
Right.
But I would agree with that. And I think there's a way that it's presented, if it's constructively, that isn't as feminine as I think we've seen in the past in therapy, and it seems to be really difficult for men to resonate with. I don't know what you think about that.
Tell me, when you say feminine, tell me more about what you mean when you say it's been feminine in the therapy space.
Well, okay, so I think, and I'm just speaking in broad generality,
Sure.
so we can get more specific or examples, but it seems to me from where I sit that women connect very well relationally. And if you were to look at it in the physical realm, it would be face to face, knee to knee, looking at each other, conversing about, men often mock, for example, women gossiping, but that's a powerful exercise for women to bond and connect in a community. So that makes sense to me. Whereas men are more, they'll still form relationships, but we're more linear. And so we'll stand shoulder to shoulder facing out to a common objective or against a common enemy. And so it seems that it's been difficult for men to consider talking about our issues as opposed to working on them actively and actively addressing them.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I agree. I mean, I think the healthy masculine is usually unified by some sort of shared purpose, right? Purpose is huge within the healthy masculine, whereas like the healthy feminine, to your point, is more connectivity, right? And again, interrelatedness, to use that word. I don't know though that they're so stark. Like what I have found is that oftentimes they will have an overlap or some kind of interconnectedness. So when I'm working with individual women or individual men, actually, if I'm working with couples too, what I often find is if we can evoke the healthy feminine in, let's say, the woman, right? If we're talking like heteronormatively here, in the woman in the dynamic, oftentimes it will be through interconnectivity, like we said. The masculine, let's say, it'll be through this idea of purpose. But then what I'm able to do is tap into the masculine and the feminine within the other as well. And so allow the woman in the dynamic to also embrace and understand her purpose and see how much passion that gives her. And then also allow the masculine to embrace the interconnectivity and the relational aspect, and then see how much kind of happiness and drive that gives him. So I guess what I mean roles, sometimes we kind of cut our nose off to spite our face when we say, well, this is it. It's only this. And so long as I'm focusing on this, I'll be happy. And it's like, yeah, but there's this whole other realm here that we're possibly missing by just keeping ourselves in this one box and saying, for men, it's purpose, and for women, it's relationship. It's like, well, yes, and, right? I'm always asking yes, and, like, what else are we missing, Yeah,
I imagine, again, I'm overgeneralizing, I know, but this will help us get some context, I think. But I imagine the role that most men believe I should say prioritize. I don't even think it's believe. I think we're biologically hardwired for certain roles, but we prioritize being protectors and providers. And I think women, I haven't thought about this as deeply as men because this is the work I do, but I would say generally women prioritize nurturing and support, I would say. And so it seems like these roles have served a really strong purpose. But I do see that there's a need for other opportunities. Men don't want to just be the workhorses, even though we can be, and I believe that that's the priority. If everything else falls apart, the last thing to go is me being able to protect and provide for my family, and a lot of other stuff can go. I'll make those sacrifices before that goes, and I think the same would probably be true of a woman. I think generally, women do want to nurture their children, raise their children, support their husbands, turn their houses into a home. But I can see that there is some area for other development above and beyond what their prioritized roles generally are.
Yeah. And I think going back to what you were saying about Jung and shadow work, the whole essence of shadow work, right, is to look into our shadow and see what elements of our soul, right, of the self, capital S, has been kind of cut off and relegated to the darkness, to the basement, through our interaction or our engagement with society, with our parents, with like the people who make the rules, right? Like, what are you allowed to enjoy? What are you not allowed to enjoy? How are you allowed to show up? How are you not allowed to show up? And so in essence, what shadow work is turning a flashlight on, kind of bringing it out, looking at it and saying, oh, that's interesting. I don't need to be ashamed of this. I'm allowed to bring it out and look at it. And if I do that and stop pretending it's not there or kind of work through the shame I have, then it becomes integrated into who I am, and it stops like calling the shots. Because what I have found and what Jung spoke about extensively in his world around shadow is that when things are in the basement, they have way more control over us than they do when we actually bring them out and start to confront the shame, which I'm sure you do the same work with the men that you work with, right? Shame is like, it's the shackles, I think, for all of us, men or women, around our ankles so often.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it is important when you start giving it a face and you start acknowledging where the way that we talk about it often is our biological, not our biological programming, our social programming. So my parents, for example, may have said certain things about, money doesn't grow on trees is an example. And while I understand it doesn't grow on trees, the sentiment is that money isn't abundant. And so therefore, if I adopted that in my life and I'm operating my life by that subconscious programming,
that's right,
I'm not really going to find a way to develop and build any measurable amount of wealth in my life because I think about it in a scarce mindset because my mom said something to me when I was 3 years old.
That's right.
And that is a wild, wild thing to me. But when you think about it, you can ask yourself, where did this thought come from? Where did this idea come from? Does it serve me? Does it help me? And I think that's something more men and women need to do.
I agree. Yeah. And I think that was actually the premise of so much of the research I did, because I'm a little bit of an information nerd. Like, I want to know why. I'm always so curious about, obviously I'm a therapist, right? I'm fascinated by why we tick, but just in general, I was like, where did all of these, I call them myths, come from, right? That women should act this way, men should act this way. If they're not, then they're not a woman or they're not a man. And why are so many people coming to me feeling unhappy or feeling restrained? And so I just started like poking around and doing a ton of research into the why. And so I agree with you. It's like when we start to look at where things came from, we do get to have a little bit more consciousness in the way that we relate to it, where we say, okay, that's a belief that was given to me, but do I have to carry it on? And I think the relationship with money is a huge one that a lot of us actually engage with day to day,
Yeah. So let's do this. Let's talk about some of these myths. And I'd like to cover a few for men and a few for women, some of the most common myths that we experience. And I think even covering it for women is going to be important. And I haven't had very many women on the podcast. So this is why I am really excited about this, because we as men need to see it from a woman's perspective. It doesn't make it right, inherently right, but we do need to see it so that we can better lead the people that we're trying to lead and have the connections that we're trying to connect. So what would you say are some of the myths that are, would you say, perpetuated by society and tradition? Is that what you would say?
Yeah, I think a lot of them are. So this book was written first and foremost because I was having these huge aha moments as I became a mother, right? As I transitioned into motherhood. And my partner, John, who, we were struggling a lot. And I was like, what is going on here? Right. And so I point to a lot of kind of smaller myths throughout the book, but really the overarching myth of motherhood that I talk about. So the book is broken up into 3 sections: motherhood, sex, and relationships. And really, I say the overarching myth for all of them is that if motherhood is not inherently something that fills you up to the brim, like I am completely filled up by this and nothing else, just like sex, just like relationships, number one. And if you're not good at them, just good at them. Like, I'm just not great at mothering. I'm just not great at being in a relationship. I'm just not great at, the kind of romantic relationship stuff. There's something wrong with you. So what I found, especially as a woman, was I was getting so many messages around motherhood. Like, this should be easy. This should be something that just fulfills you to the brim, right? You should just get this. You should want this. And as I started being like, yeah, but I don't know if that's true for me, all of the shame started coming up because I was getting these messages from everywhere. And so these were kind of the myths that I started poking in the research I was doing.
But how do you separate the myth? And I've seen women go through that. Women in my life who have very maternal instincts. They're great mothers, and they still struggle. So that makes sense. Just like a man, I have great paternal instincts, and yet I still struggle, and I still do things that aren't in the best interest of my kids, or don't formulate a deeper connection, or I mess up. We all do that.
We all do.
But how do you separate the myth of that? Because I agree with that, with the pendulum swinging so far the other way, and it seems like the narrative and culture is becoming more and more, which is why we're having declining marriage rates, declining birth rates, is that, just to put it bluntly, women don't need no man. And that's a common narrative that I don't think is healthy for women or for men or for society.
Yeah, I agree with you in that it's not healthy. I actually talk about one of the chapters in my book. I go into kind of the different waves of feminism and kind of, again, understanding like, how did we get here? And looking at like the feminism of, I would say like my mom's generation, right? So I'm an elder millennial, as they like to call us.
Very fancy.
We're so wise. The elder millennials. So like our mothers and our grandmothers, right? Their kind of wave of feminism and how so much of what they were taught and thus we were taught as girls growing into women was that in order to be respected, you have to be more like a man. Right. And I talk about how detrimental that has actually been to women of my generation. Right. So many of us grew up in households where we had strong female presences that were leading and that were mothering and that were grandparenting, you know, all these things. And we were hearing this, I don't know, this chatter in the background, whether it was verbal or nonverbal, about the men in our lives. So our fathers, our grandparents, our uncles, about men are useless. Men can't be trusted. Men are going to hurt you, right? Men are going to walk out and leave. All of these kind of insidious little things that many women my age heard growing up. Now, listen, they were based in personal hurt and personal experience, right?
Sure.
But the problem is that it turned into this, like you said, a swing of the pendulum, where now you have a generation of women who have come into womanhood, right? Adulthood. And we were raised with that lens. And it's really hard for us to question it when we're looking at our mothers and our grandmothers and their very real hurt. And so I think exactly what you said, pendulum, I actually use the pendulum theory in the book a lot, is showing how we do this thing as people. And it goes back as long as we have research, right? Where we go bing, 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 and we kind of bounce back and forth in the pendulum. The Hegelian, I always like screw up his name. It's a German name. Theory of pendulum says that essentially on the kind of push or drive towards bettering ourselves as human beings, right? Evolution as human beings. The pendulum swings back and forth, but as it does that, the center is never exactly the center. It's almost like each time we swing, we get a little further into like what we're kind of evolving, right, to be. And so I believe that to be true. Jungian psychology too, I hold as a depth psychotherapist, I hold the collective as much as I hold the individual. And I really like to see how everything that's happening right now socially, I believe, is in service of us starting to find our way into middle. Like we have swung so far, right, in order to figure out how do we get back to the center. Middle. That's right. That's right. Exactly. Yep.
Well, you even see it with men, and I've seen it prop up over the past. I've been doing this work now for 10 years, and I can tell you unequivocally that it is more and more so that men are not only rejecting some of these ideologies, but blatantly fighting against them. And it's almost as if men have created this version for men of third wave feminism. And that's the problem. And so now you have two extremes fighting against each other. Women are the enemy. Men are the enemy. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
That's right.
Like nobody's the enemy. Let's figure out how to come closer together. How do men serve women effectively? How do women serve men effectively? And how do we make society better? And women aren't the enemy. To your point, there's a lot of hurt men who say horrible things about women because they've experienced it. But we have to be careful of applying an isolated experience broadly or to an entire group.
Yeah, I agree. I also think too, it's like if we're talking about the kind of evolution, right? The evolution of our species, which we've just continued to watch over time. What I think is interesting is this idea of like not needing each other. And I think where I'm seeing that come from is that, yes, in the last, let's see, in the States, women couldn't have a bank account until 1978, right? So let's just say since 1978, women have been able to be financially independent, right? So at a bare minimum, to survive, women don't inherently need a man to survive anymore, right? Like we used to.
Right. Sure.
I think when I hear women talk about, I don't need men anymore, in my experience, it's usually coming from that lens. And so what I've heard so often in the couples work I've done is a woman saying to a man, I don't need you, I want you. And to me, that feels much more powerful. If I'm choosing you to be here and I'm choosing to be here, not because I need you to survive, but because I actually am choosing to be here, inherently in both directions, that actually changes the way we relate to one another. Because if you know that somebody's choosing you, not because they have to, you're going to show up differently. You're going to act differently. You're going to relate differently, right? And I think that's happening actually on both sides. When we say, I don't need you for survival, I'm actually choosing this, we get to go, oh shit, all right, well, how do I show up differently knowing that the person's not here because they're shackled to me, you know?
Yeah. I think that does pose quite a bit of a problem in that it's so easy for both sides to be financially abundant. It's so easy in the era of hookup culture to get your physical needs met without having to be in a committed relationship. And those are just two small examples. There's other examples where it makes it so much easier to not be fully committed into relationships. And I think both sides have a fear that if the slightest thing goes wrong, or we get into an argument, or we're going through a rough patch, we'll just chalk it up, quit, throw in the towel, because it's so much easier to get whatever it is that you were providing somewhere else. And I think that's horrible, because I think John actually talked about it, repairing ruptures, when we did our last podcast, repairing ruptures. And he suggested that couples who are able to repair those ruptures are couples who are stronger than those who had never gone through any of those hardships at all.
100%. 100%. And I agree with you. I think that that's the extreme. I think that what we're seeing is that pendulum swing, right? Which is the people going, well, if I don't need this person to survive, then screw them. You know, I'm just going to go off and I'm going to get on Tinder and I'm going to get my needs met other ways. I do think though that if we pull back and we look at it again, like let's hold it as a collective, it's like, well, partly I think we're learning that doesn't work. And I think that the people who are coming back to me and saying, so I did that thing. I ended my marriage. I blew up my relationship. I went out there. The grass is in fact not greener, right? But I don't know that they would have known that had they not had that embodied experience of, oh shit, what I should have done maybe is learned how to have proper rupture and repair, learned how to work through, disagreements, all of these things that I think you're right. I think we've actually, not even just in romantic relationships, I see it even like friendships and familial relationships, we've thrown by the wayside, right? It's like, I always talk about this idea of how one of the things I hate about pop psychology and kind of social media psychology is like what I call like this positive psychology kind of trend where it's like, good vibes only. Like if this person is bringing me down in any way, I cut them out of my life, And I think that's horribly misguided. And I think we're actually creating more isolation in doing that.
Yeah, it's the equivalent in the physical realm of the body positive movement. It's not a good thing to be severely obese. I mean, sure, you can believe in your worth and you can be happy with who you are and you can develop your personality, but let's not pretend that being severely obese is a positive thing. It's certainly not, and it's going to lead to a lot of devastation in a person's life. Yeah.
And I think going back, it's like we have to almost swing the pendulum so far that we're able to creep back from the edge, And I will say too, this idea, what I have seen in relationships and the ones that I have witnessed kind of evolve and unfold on the other side of a potential like, okay, we've hit our edge and this is kind of make or break, right? And I would even say I would include John and I in this. When we've done the work to get to the other side of, okay, we don't need each other, right, for survival necessarily, but we're choosing each other. What does that look like and how does that impact the way we show up? I think on the other side of that, our connection has actually gotten so much deeper and so much stronger because we are actually committed to the choosing, not committed to the like, air quote needing, which I think kind of leads us into this very dangerous codependent way of being in relationships, which is like, oh my God, the world is scary. I'm inherently less valuable if I'm not in a relationship. So I got to lock something down and I got to keep it at all costs. I don't think that actually adds to people's fulfillment in their relationships, if that's kind of the belief that got you there or the belief that's keeping you there. I think that you have to have a certain amount of choosing, right, going into it. And that takes work. You got to deprogram some of that fear before you can get there.
Yeah, I'm in a great relationship, and we've both had discussions about this where we're both well aware that if we were to not be in a relationship, both of us would be okay. Yep. We'd be fine. We'd be in other relationships throughout our lives. We'd go on and raise our kids. Everything would be fine. We don't want that. We're not advocating for that for each other, but we know we would. And that, I think, brings a sense, for me anyways, I can't speak for her, but for me, it brings a sense of calmness and clarity in my life. I don't feel as anxious. I don't feel like you said, I have to do all the right things and say all the right things. And heaven forbid, we get into a little disagreement about something and then it's going to blow up the relationship. And to her credit, she feels very much the same way. It would be difficult if she didn't, because then the fear of her leaving over things somebody shouldn't leave over would be present, and therefore a guy would be more inclined to walk on eggshells, say all the right things, do all the right things, and the roles reversed would be the same thing.
That's exactly right. And I think what you're speaking to is the ability within a romantic relationship for us to actually start to heal some of those attachment wounds and kind of bring ourselves into a more secure base, right? And I think that similarly, John and I have done it in the same way, which is like, I heard something actually. I started with a new therapist myself recently, post fires, post the chaos of this last year. And one of the things she said to me, which I was like, I feel like I knew that as a therapist, but for some reason, her saying it to my face, I was like, oh, right.
It's different.
I know. She said, in order to truly show up authentically in a relationship, you have to have kind of faced the reality that it could end. Like you have to really be with that. You have to know that it's a possibility, right? And almost be a little okay with it ending. To your point, it's not like that's what we want, but it's like, if it does end, I know I'll be okay. When you really reckon with that, then you can show up authentically in a relationship. And until then, like you said, it's eggshells. There's a lot of faking. There's a lot of people pleasing and all of these kind of, like I say, more codependent ways of relating that show up.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wish more men knew this. Women too. Again, I say men just because that's who I work with exclusively, sure. But I wish more men understood. I think about for relationships, for example, let's say they're in a long-term relationship and it's on the rocks or it's ending. They're going through a separation or a divorce. And I'm talking with these guys, letting them know that, hey, it's going to be okay. Whatever happens, if you guys reconcile, if you don't, it's going to be okay. And it's really hard. Obviously, we've all been through breakups and divorces and separations to acknowledge that in the moment. But if you rewind 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you've had heartbreak before and you can't even remember it right now.
Yep.
So why don't you believe that you're actually going to be okay if this one ends? It's obviously the emotion and the struggle and the fear of loss and the challenge that comes with it. But yeah, everybody will be fine. That's the conclusion I've come to. We're all going to be okay.
I think that's exactly right. And I think that's a lot of the work that I do with clients is helping them heal that exact wound that you're speaking to, which is really the fear of abandonment, right? And we place so much of that healing power on this other person, this person that's outside of us, this external entity that you're basically saying you have all of the power over whether or not I'm okay. Right. And so much of the work that I work with people on this codependency recovery aspect is absolutely not. No one person outside of yourself holds that much power. That comes from within. Right. And when I'm able to say again, I'll be okay. And I know that I can relate to another person from such a more secure, grounded, whole way than if I'm looking at you going, oh, I have to cling on to you because if you go away, I will die.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and also people I think are just less bothered with little trivial things that used to be a problem.
Right. That's right.
It's like, maybe she does a weird, I don't know, maybe she makes a weird noise when she eats or something. And it's like, that's,
who cares?
If she's good in every other department, that's pretty good. Or maybe she doesn't like something that you do. And instead of being self-defensive and upset and bothered that she brings it up, just try to accommodate if it's reasonable, right. And it's just a much more casual, peaceful way to live your life. I do want to go back to something that you said when you were talking about this relationship as a necessity versus a desire, a need versus a want. Mm-hmm. The way I'm going to frame it doesn't really sound right, but so I hope you understand what I mean. But what would a guy want from a woman in order for it to be a want type relationship, and vice versa? What would a woman want from a man in order for her to be desirous of it, not need it out of necessity?
Okay. So what does a relationship essentially look like that's established in desire and want, not in need on both sides?
Yeah. And even when you work with your clients, what is it that men are looking for outside of, because obviously the financial provision isn't nearly as prevalent for men looking for that in women, which is not really a priority for most men when they make their decision who to be with. So what are they looking for? And then what are women looking for outside of the financial provision? Because it's more common that they can do it themselves now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if we strip away those two elements that really were such driving factors, let's say even just one generation before us, right? I think right now what I'm seeing on both sides is this idea of partnership. And I think especially for women, this is what I hear so often, which is I want a partner in every essence of the word, right? I don't want a dominator and I don't want somebody to dominate. I want somebody who actually stands shoulder to shoulder with me. I want somebody who respects me and who I respect as a human being, as an individual, which means I don't want to change them. They don't want to change me, right? I want somebody who this sounds trivial, but it's not. You know this. It's like you want to spend your life with somebody who you genuinely enjoy and get along with. So actually choosing somebody who you really enjoy spending time with is super important. So I hear that a lot, obviously. And then this idea of emotional intelligence, EQ, right, has come up more and more and more, which actually harkens back to what you were talking about with John, which is this ability to have rupture and repair. Kind of a little bit of a bird walk here, but I read something once that said millennials are the first generation to apologize to their children. A lot of our parents, did not really have the capacity. Again, we're speaking generally, right? But did not have the capacity to look inward, own their shit, and apologize for their shit in a lot of ways, right? Many of us grew up in households where we walked on eggshells, things got brushed under the rug. There was like yelling and explosion, and then there was nothing. Like there was very extreme ways or no ways at all of dealing with conflict. So in order to actually now be an adult that was raised that way, that has EQ, you have to do some work on yourself, right? Because we didn't learn it growing up, most of us. So there's this real desire for EQ for both men and women to say, I want that other person to be able to not be defensive, to be able to see themselves clearly, right? And take responsibility and to collaborate with me on what that evolution and that growth feels like or looks like. So those are just some of the things that I hear really often on both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah. Well, so, okay, I wanted to ask about dominance. You use that word and compare that to leadership, because in my experience, I believe that the majority of women want a man who can lead not only themselves, but also lead them as the woman and be the leader of the household. Would you agree with that? That might just be my own little window that I'm seeing it through, but that seems to be pretty common for me.
I would say some, and I guess that this is where I usually do the yes and thing again. I mean, I think even in the women that I have heard put words to it similarly to what you're saying, there's an energy behind what leadership looks like, right? And they want a man that they can rely on and that feels like a strong, sturdy base, but can also lead from connection to self. That can also lead from a place of empathy and compassion. That can also lead from a place, right? So I think that's where the thing around dominance comes from, because inherently in leadership is not dominance. You don't have to dominate your children, for example, to lead them, right? And I think that's the slippery slope that I find often is like women, yes, what you're saying, women do want somebody, a man energetically to be a leader. But so often they've experienced like a conflation between leader and dominator. And that's what I find people are coming to me saying, I don't want that, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, that's fair, because I look at it and when I hear the word dominance, I think that likely comes at the expense of somebody else. So if I'm dominant as the man in the relationship, it's going to be at the expense of her or my children. If I'm leading, it's going to be on behalf of her or and my children. I'm sure.
Right.
In some cases, not always, right? There are things that I need to decide on my own and make decisions on my own with her in mind. Sure. With consideration of her needs and wants and desires.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I'm glad you brought that up. And the concept of reliability really stood out with me when you said that, because this is what I hope men hear in some of these conversations that we're taking away with what you're sharing, is that, everybody says like, oh, you got to be a good leader. Well, what does that actually mean? And what is she actually looking for? So when you say reliability, that to me really stands out, because that is what more of us as men should do. When we say we're going to do something, we do it. Even the trivial things. Because if you say a bunch of things and you don't follow through, man, that will and I've had this where I've done this personally, and that will undermine a relationship faster than just about anything else.
I agree. It's like you have to be someone of your word, right? If you don't have, words are great, but actions are everything. And so I think the more often, to your point, even just starting with the small things and asking yourself, am I a person of my word? Am I a man of my word, right? Am I putting intention behind my words, which I think oftentimes we'll say the words without any intention. And that can kind of lead us down the path of then not putting like our money where our mouth is. Am I grounded in who I am? And am I speaking truth from that grounded place? Because if I'm not, I'll probably get myself into trouble down the road.
Yeah. And I don't even think it's malicious when we say we'll do things. I don't think the majority of people are being malicious. I think they're just being a little bit flippant and casual with their words.
Yeah. Or people pleasy, honestly. Like, I think even in that, a lot of the work I do in codependency recovery is kind of giving these like, it's funny. I got labeled the cold water in the face therapist once by a group member, and it's kind of stuck where, I'll say to people like, listen, I'm not saying, to your point, it's not malicious. So often it's unconscious or it's like survival strategy. So we're not really aware of it. But people pleasing is manipulative. There is an essence of manipulation in not being true to your word and being grounded in what you say, right? And doing it because you want to make somebody else feel some sort of way, or want to make sure that the boat doesn't get rocked, or want to make sure that this person stays, right? It's dishonest, actually. And people always kind of cringe at that, like, oh, I'm not a dishonest person. And I'm like, right. And the way that you're acting is inherently dishonest. And that's something we've got to be able to like hear and face about ourselves if we're really going to change it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. The other thing you talked about is the concept of respect. And I think the most important thing, maybe not the most important, one of the most important things that we can do when it comes to respect is having a backbone. And this is antithetical to the people pleasing. If for example, she says something to me that I don't agree with, it's not my job to agree with and affirm her belief. It's my job to say, I don't agree with that. Here's why. Now I can do that respectfully, but I think that women probably can appreciate a man who has a backbone, even to her, because she would probably pick up that if he does towards her, then he will towards other people.
That's right. You just hit that nail on the head. And I think, even going back to that word dominance, like I said earlier, it's, I don't want to be dominated, but I also don't want somebody who I can dominate. It goes both ways. And there's respect inherently baked into that, right? If you're somebody who stands in their solid sense of self, knows who you are, and can say to somebody, you're allowed to have your feelings and your opinion. I'm not going to change necessarily to agree with you, but I'm also not going to try to change you to agree with me, right? It goes both ways. Like, that's respecting the other as an individual and as a human being and their sovereignty. And that really creates a level of respect I think is so missing, actually. I see so often missing in relationships.
Are there some common misunderstandings that men in relationships with women have? I mean, there's probably an infinite number of misunderstandings, but are there some common themes where women are trying to communicate one thing and men are misinterpreting it, picking it up differently? And how can we as men do a better job translating her communication, for lack of a better term?
That's a big question, Ryan.
Is there an app or something that I can run it through, and then she says it and then it goes through the app and then it says what she really means so that I can understand it?
Yeah, there's these new Google Translate earpods, actually, or not Google, they're Apple. John just brought it home, right? The people here are speaking Spanish and I can hear them in English. Let's just do the man-women thing in there. I to your point, I think there's many that happen. I see all the time in the therapy world, but let me see if I can think of some common themes. So some of the common themes that I see, I think are around respect and sovereignty again, as like, and it goes both ways actually, right? Each person wants to be seen and valued for who they are without a feeling that you're trying to change me or that you think there's something about me that's like not good enough or not worthy, right? So I think every human being wants that. They want to be seen for who they are and respected for who they are. And that's a tricky one that comes up a lot. I think the other one is a sense of,
before you move on, can you put a pin in the next one?
Yeah.
Because when you say wants to be seen and heard, how, I know we don't have time to go into depth into all of this, but how does a man see and hear her? Because the common thing is she wants to explain how her day went, maybe a relationship with her girlfriend, or maybe how the kids were behaving that day, or maybe her boss was kind of a jerk that day. And the man hears, let me solve your problems. And it's laughable at this point because everybody knows she just wants to explain, and yet it's still really difficult. So how does a man, quote unquote, see and hear his woman without feeling that need, his own need or his own desire to solve the problems?
Yeah, I mean, our need to be needed in some way, which shows up on the other side of it too, right? So I think, again, this actually goes both ways because I work with a lot of women who do the same thing, which is like our codependent desire to make the problem go away. So essentially what this looks like is, and you've heard this before, right? It's like I say to people all the time, when somebody comes to you and they want to talk about something, first and foremost, zip it. Just completely zip it. Don't give your feedback. Don't give your advice before you look at them and you ask, do you want advice and feedback or do you just want to be heard, right? Allow the other person the kind of respect and the honor that you are asking them what they need from you in this moment. Because sometimes I will say to John, no, I actually want your advice. Like I'm looking for different approaches, right? It's not that I never want you to help me fix it. It's just that I don't always want you to fix it, right? And so if you get in the habit of asking somebody, also, that feels really nice to be the receiver of somebody going, no, what is it that you need from me in this moment? And then I'll do my best to kind of provide where I can, right? So I think that it seems silly, but it's still a really hard practice to do, which is just like, I look at you in this relationship and I know inherently you've got this. I trust in your innate ability. I do this with my kid, right? Even in her struggles, I need her to know that I look at her as somebody who is strong and capable because that's how she's then going to see herself. If I'm always swooping in to fix it for her, eventually that's going to impact the way she sees herself. She's going to believe that number one, she's not strong and capable. And number two, I don't see her as strong and capable. And I think this also impacts our adult relationships too.
Yeah, I've got a really close friend, Kip Sorensen, and he talks about this a lot. He says that when you look at other people, whether it's your wife or your children, as if they're inherently broken or something's wrong with them or something needs to be fixed, that creates all sorts of problems. And the energy that you now have towards that person is completely different. And of course, their energy towards you is going to be hindered as well.
That's right, because they feel it, right? And so if I feel and know that you look at me as inherently broken, a lot of times what I see happen is I will show up inherently broken. It's like I will embody what you're putting on me. So if you believe I'm an idiot, okay, I guess I'm an idiot, and I'll just act that way, right?
Will you do so deliberately, or is that subconscious?
No, it's subconscious. This is that whole like overfunctioner, underfunctioner dance that I see happen so often. The underfunctioner in a relationship so often is acting that way because they see themselves reflected back at themselves as somebody who can't get their shit together, as somebody who, again, like is stupid or is worthless. And so there becomes this almost like a reinforcement loop where it's like, oh, okay, well, this person who is supposedly, I love them, they love me, thinks that I'm worthless, I must be worthless. And so I'll act as such. And a lot of times it's an unconscious kind of behavior that we've really got to pick apart in order to start working through it.
What can a man do to be supportive in that? Because let's say his wife is exhibiting some of these skills, and it might not even have anything to do with him. Maybe she's always believed that because her parents were abusive to her or something, right? So how does a man help her work through that she is valuable, that she isn't broken? Same thing with kids. How do you help them develop the confidence they need to solve their own problems?
I mean, listen, as a therapist, I'm going to say it starts with you. It always does, right? So
Yeah,
what does
sure.
that look like, right? What it looks like is for you to go inward and start to develop a bit of a skill to notice how I get anxious when this person starts to struggle. And so my anxiety around their struggle is what creates the action, which is me swooping in to fix it, which is me brushing them aside, which is me going, oh, and rolling my eyes again, whatever my response is. And so what I need to do very, very beginning of that kind of process is to start to notice my anxiety around it and start to soothe that anxiety so that the action is not coming out of the anxiety. The action is coming from a place, again, of groundedness of like, no, I see you and I'm going to take a deep breath because it's hard, but I trust that you can handle this. And I will be over here managing my discomfort around your discomfort. But at the same time, I'm not going to act on it. I'm going to let you figure it out.
That's actually really good because I've done this personally and I still do this. And it's something that I need to work on where if somebody's dealing with something, well, it must be me. I must have said something. I must have done this. I must not have done that. I must have whatever, fill in the blank. And it's actually very selfish because the majority of the time it has, unless you actually did something,
that's right.
It really probably doesn't have to do with you. And then I've noticed that the other person is then not only anxious about whatever they were anxious about, now they're anxious about making sure you're okay because now they have to babysit you.
Yes.
And this is one thing I know that women hate is having a adult husband child. They've got 3 kids, now they've got 4. That's the joke, right? And obviously a woman would hate that. I would hate that.
Yeah. And I talk about this in the book, actually. This is one of the elements that I talk about, which is like how suddenly they become another child. And it's an energy thing, right? Number one, it happens usually when the first child enters a dynamic and there becomes this like, what I call almost like an energy competition where suddenly, it was just me and you and I was your everything. And now suddenly there's this being that is now your everything. And so now I'm kind of vying for that attention. I see that happen very often. And when that first kid enters right into a double, it becomes a triple. And so what happens is like the woman's over here going, I have to actually keep this being alive. I don't need to keep you alive. You're a grown up, right? And so they're torn and they're looking at their partner going, are you kidding right now? Like, do you not see how much energy and attention this little being requires? But again, a lot of that comes from, if I'm on the other side of that, my ability to know that I'm okay and that I've got the inner resources to be okay. I don't need to extract it from this person outside of myself. And so, it can cause a lot of issues down the road when we don't know, like, I'm good. I'm going to go inward. I'm going to soothe my own anxiety. I don't need to fix or make anybody else act any way other than how they are for me to be okay.
Yeah. It's funny and I know you're asking this rhetorically when you say, can't you see that I'm doing this other thing to keep this human being alive? No, we can't because we're not doing it. So we literally, we're like, men are like this. And I'm like this. What's the problem? I'm good. Why aren't you good? And it's hard to see that through. And again, I think that comes down to some of the biological programming, right? When you look at a mother and how she responds to a baby crying versus how a man responds to a baby. It's different. That's biological. And so it's really difficult for us to see that. But I have found, and this is why I advocate for men having other men that they can spend time with. So if she's doing something and she needs some time or some space or needs to be with her, then you should have friends that you can call and hang out with and go work out with. It's also why I advocate for having a hobby that doesn't involve her all the time.
That's right.
Go train jujitsu, go for a run, go hunting, go shoot, go paint, go take pictures. I don't care. Do something that doesn't require her to be involved in it because you both need the space.
I agree. And you both need to be your own solid sense of self again, right? In order for a relationship to work, you both have to be a solid sense of self outside of the dynamic, right? Otherwise, you kind of merge and blend, and then that's not sustainable, at least not in a healthy way, especially once children come into the dynamic, because inherently she's busy now. She's got, and it's not that she won't have time for you, but she will have more time and more space for you if she feels like she's giving it to you from a desire, not from a, I have to take care of this child because he needs it or he's going to power or throw a tantrum, right? I see that happen all the time in my couples work, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I bet. Well, you were going to say one other thing. I told you to put a pin in it, but you were going to, do you remember what that was when it comes to what we as men misinterpret?
Shockingly, I do, which is very surprising these days. I don't remember things usually. I remember the word safety was going to be a big one that I brought up, which is the feeling of being safe. This one is reflected back to me in the couples I work with a lot, where, and I don't think that they're in silos. Like, I do think there's a connective tissue through all of these ways that people show up and say, this is what my need is. And I'll say why I believe that in a second. But inherently, I think, especially once children come into the picture, but not always just that, there is a desire or a need. And I think you're right. I think this is actually biological, right? So as the woman, I am now in kind of nesting and caretaking mode, right? So way back when, we would have had a village to kind of gather around the woman who had just given birth, and now it's just you and me, unfortunately, right? So unfortunately, this actually does fall a lot on the partner in the relationship. But it's like, I need to be able to focus on this and put all of my energy and all of my love and my time into this. And I need to know that I'm safe to do that. So I need to know that I can let my guard down. I need to know that you'll maybe take care of the homestead, right? Like, you've got it. I know that you've got it. But also emotionally, like, I need to know that you're good. I need to know that I can put all my energy here and that that's not going to somehow cause some kind of strain or issue or rift with you. And so I hear the idea of safety reflected back a lot. And again, it translates across a lot of kind of realms, but it's a word that I hear frequently.
That's interesting. Yeah, I can see that. Emotional safety, physical safety, not having to worry about babysitting somebody else's emotions so that they can focus on the thing. It also just makes you more attractive. So
I mean, 1,000%, 1,000%. I said that when we moved here, actually, the month leading up to our move to Costa Rica, I said to John, my book was just about to go into, the PR mode, and his is, we're both authors, but his is on the downswing. So his book had already come out. And I said, listen, we need to talk about this. When I land, we're going to be in very different places. Like, I'm ratcheting up, you've ratcheted down. So I need to be able to, my book is a baby in essence, right? Like, I need to be able to put my focus there and put my energy on like raising this thing up. I can't worry about you. Like, you need to be good. Right. And we had a really serious conversation about that. And God bless him, he took it to heart and he was like, you're right. And when we landed, he got a really good coach and he made sure he was kind of doing his work. And he was really supportive. Like, in that moment, it was like he was doing more of the childcare. He was doing more of the housework because he's like, you have to focus on raising this baby up. And I need to be the support system in that. Right. And it was so beautiful and holy shit, so attractive, Ryan, I have to say.
I bet. Yeah, I bet. Well, okay, so I've got another thought that came to mind, and I really want to have this discussion about these misunderstandings. We often hear that women say, I want a man who's in touch with his feelings. I wish he could be more vulnerable with me. And then it seems like sometimes that happens. And then she's less attracted to the guy because he's trying to do the thing that she asked. So something's happening. Either she's saying the wrong words or not explaining it correctly, or he is not interpreting them correctly, or he's delivering it poorly.
Yes. I think it's both. So I don't know if you've ever read Bell Hooks' The Will to Change, but Bell Hooks did an unbelievable, I highly suggest it, and I have a lot of men read it, but it really talks about the breakdown of like what living in a dominator system does to men, not to women. It's like almost like women aside. It's like, how does this actually impact men? And I'll paraphrase because the quote is kind of long, but it is a beautiful quote. Essentially what she talks about was her aha understanding around exactly what you're saying when she was in her 20s. She was in a relationship, she's heterosexual. She's in a relationship with a man. And she realizes she's been asking for exactly what you're saying, which is, I want a man that's in touch with his emotions. But then what she realizes that when he comes to her with his emotions, she has this like, response.
Yes, cringe. Yeah.
Right. And so what we start to understand and the way that she breaks it down is, first of all, we we could just be really black and white about this and say you can't have it both ways, right? We know that. But I think so much of this actually for women is our inner dominators. It's like we also live in society. It's not just men that are the dominators, right? Like we live in a dominator system. The systems that we live in teach us that there's one up, one down, right? We humans are above earth and animals. Men are above women. Some races are above other races. Like we're just kind of steeped in this like dominator kind of approach to living. That is also integrated internally into women as well. And so women are also taught to believe in some way that our emotionality is ick. We're also taught to believe that it's shameful. We're also taught to believe that we're too much or too emotional. Yes, there are more spaces in our society for us to explore that, but we still have a lot of that inner shame and inner ick because we're all kind of taught the same shit at some level. So what happens is when my man then shows up in that way, I always say in therapy, I cannot see and accept in somebody else what I cannot see and accept in myself. So if I'm ashamed of being too much, when somebody comes to me and they're a little too much, it's going to really activate me and feel really gross. If I don't have a healthy relationship with anger, when somebody else is angry, I'm not going to be able to tolerate it and I'm going to shut it down. So we can only meet people so far as we've gone. And since so much of this is unconscious, it's really hard for us to even see it or name it because it's like so deep, you know?
So, okay, well that makes sense. But then how does a man navigate those waters? You know, what you're saying is she might have some work to do on herself so that she doesn't feel shame around expressing emotion. That's something she needs to address. How does a man navigate that? Because I think if we're talking about myths and misconceptions, I think there's a misconception that men are just heartless and we're cold and we don't really care. We're not romantic or any of these things. And we are, you know, the thought that comes to mind is, you know, men are not generally romantic, but I don't believe that to be true at all. I imagine, you know, a young man marrying his beautiful bride, wanting to have sons and daughters and go to ballet dances and give her flowers when she's done with ballet and go play baseball in the yard with a picket fence. That's a romantic version. That's a romantic vision.
I agree.
We are.
I agree.
So how do we navigate being able to communicate the way we're feeling without it being an ick or a cringe moment for the people that we love?
Ooh, this is such a rich conversation and I could go in so many directions. I mean, first I will say, yes, I know a lot of men are more actually romantic even than the women that I know. I mean, in my dynamic for sure. I think John's more of the romantic. I think in our society, what I have come to understand is that one of the deepest, mostly kind of unconscious fears that men have is being shamed by their woman. And so it leads the charge on a lot of the ways that men show up in their relationships, which is like protecting themselves from this perceived or potential shame. So they can be very guarded because of that fear. Now, again, mostly unconscious, right? And I think when women feed into that and we shame men for their inherent romanticism, for their inherent human beingness, which is to feel emotions and be emotive, right? Like as a being, what we do is we kind of get that feedback loop. Like the man goes, see, in their own mind, they go, see, this is why I can't show my emotions because I'm going to feel weak and I'm going to be shamed for it, right? And so oftentimes what I'll do is I'll talk to clients about this idea of preemptive communication. So let's say you're in a coaching program or you're working with a therapist and you're kind of getting to the root of some of this. You might go to your partner and you might say, hey, listen, something that I've realized, right, is that I've been really cut off from this aspect of myself that is highly feeling, right? Like I want to be able to tap into that. And that's both sides of the pendulum. That's like sadness, grief, anger, but that's also joy and playfulness, right? Because it's all the range of human emotion. When we numb one, we numb the other, by the way. So I want to be able to tap into this, right? But what I'm realizing is I have a lot of like embarrassment and shame around coming to you with my emotions because I'm worried about how you're going to perceive them. What are your thoughts on that? Preemptive communication says, hey, I'm working on this thing and I'd like you to be my partner in my work on this thing. Can you talk about it with me? Can you see me in this work? Can you support me in the development of this part of myself, right? That creates partnership. That creates, it's us against this thing that we're both kind of trying to work on. And then it also invites her in to realize, like, what is my perspective on when my man comes to me and shows emotion? How do I show up in a shaming way? Oh shit. I should probably look at that and take stock. So regardless of what we're talking about, preemptive communication, when you are realizing there's something you want to work on about yourself, can be so powerful in a romantic relationship. Huge.
Yeah, that's a powerful concept. I would say, and tell me if you agree or disagree with this, that I would give one word of caution. And it's because I've seen men do this and then they have no follow through. So they'll say to their wife, hey, I'm going to work on this thing. I know I haven't been showing up this way and I'd like to do this. And will you help me and be my partner on it? And then he doesn't do anything. And it would have been better for you just to keep your mouth shut than to say you're going to do this thing and not do it. Because that goes back to the integrity conversation we were having earlier.
That's right. That's right. And that's so spot on. And I see that happen also a lot. And it has to come from within, right? Like, I'm not changing because you told me you want me to change. Inherently, that change has to come from an internal desire of, no, there's actually this part of myself that I really want to work on. I want to face, I want to confront, I want to, accept about myself. I want to do this integration work. You have to be committed to that work for yourself. It's a great to have when you have a partner that can mirror it back to you and that can see you in that. A lot of people don't have that and they're still doing the work. So you've got to be able to do it on your own, to your point. Otherwise you're not a man of their word. And then you erode safety, which again leads into this whole spiral that we talked about.
What would you say the converse is where men might misunderstand what women are after and looking for? What have you found that women misunderstand in men?
I mean, so much. I think we're misunderstanding each other in so many ways. And, one of the things when you and I were emailing back and forth and we were like, this is going to be an interesting conversation. Like, we disagree on some stuff. One of the things that I was talking to my best girlfriend, who I do a lot of work with kind of out there with clients and, leading women's groups and all these things. One of the things that her and I get a lot of flack for is actually the way that we hold women accountable in the work that we do. First and foremost, the base of all my work is in codependency recovery. I believe we are all codependent to some varying degree. I think it's the way that society has taught us that love should look and feel like. At the core tenet of healing,
maybe not
and
even society, maybe just individual experiences, right? Your mom and dad weren't present, or you didn't get what you need. I mean, there's a lot, right? It's
the hammer in the coffin, right? For most of us, is then we see it generation after generation after generation, and then it becomes deeply ingrained, right? But I would say even in our culture of media, it's like, it's the way that we lose ourselves in each other. I'm not a complete self without you being, it's all of these ways that we're
the Disney
taught.
endings.
That's right. That's exactly it. And so what I believe is that any kind of healing in a relationship is going to start with you owning your 100%, period. So in any dynamic, in any situation, there's always something you can own, right? Now, that doesn't mean owning more than is yours. I'm not saying you take on somebody else's shit, but I'm saying we all have to get better at looking in the mirror, separating this belief of I've done something bad means I am bad. Because so long as those two beliefs are coupled, we're never going to be able to look at ourselves and actually own our stuff. So we've got to really be able to say, what's my part in this? And I do believe that women are some of the biggest upholders of some of these dominator systems, but also some of the really unhealthy ways that this man versus woman fight battle that we've got going on right now are continuing to go. And so, whether it's the victim mentality, whether it's the again, screw men, I don't need them, they're useless mentality. And again, I'm not saying that it doesn't come from somewhere. We can work on the wounding, but we've got to own that part. Otherwise, this is never going to get healed. It can't just be pointing the finger at somebody else, right? It just can't.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, and on our side, we're doing the same thing with men.
That's right.
Yeah, sure. Some women may have acted like that. A woman may have treated you like that. And there's nothing you can do about it. So go to work on yourself, pick better partners, be a better partner, and live a better life.
That's right. Be the person, right? Yeah. What's that saying? It's like, be the person you wish to see in the world. Yeah. Be the partner that you wish to also invite into your world, right? Stop pointing the finger and saying they need to get better at being a partner. Well, how are you improving yourself? What does that look like, right? What is your ability to stand on your own 2 feet look and feel like? I think when we relate from that place, we become less concerned with changing somebody else. And we become more like, oh, this either works for me or it doesn't. I either chose this partnership out of a place of integrity or I didn't. And then that's the thing that I have to then like drill down into.
And I feel generally like it's just an equation. If you change the input, the output's going to be different. So if I show up differently, she is going to show up differently, positive or negatively. Like she's going to be different. That's right. I found that when we do our work as men, then she's going to respond to that. Of course she is. Just like he would respond if a woman were to change the way she shows up in the relationship.
You're changing the system, right? I mean, within psychology, it's called systems theory. And really what it talks about is that every systems, whether you're talking about the relational dynamic, whether you're talking about the family unit, we're basically living organisms. And so when one part of the organism changes, what happens is the rest of the organism tries to get that one back in line into what is their homeostasis, which may or may not be healthy homeostasis, but it's what's normal for them, right? And so that's what makes it so hard when you do this work is because you're going to get pushback from the people around you that are like, hey, I didn't sign on to you changing the system. Get back in line, right? But that's information for you. So what you said about somebody will respond either positively or negatively, I say all the time, again, we can't change other people. So do your work and allow the other person to give you information and then do with that information what you will, right? But that shouldn't be the reason why you do or don't do the work.
I've actually found that to be true quite often with the work that we do, where we have organizations and we have communities where we get together as men and talk about these things and improve our lives. And I've had women who at best are skeptical of what we're doing and at worst are very antithetical, very hostile to what we're doing. And they really resist initially. And they take little jabs and they mock and they're like, go do your little man club thing. They say things like that. And then over time, and that to me seems to be the biggest differentiator is over time. It's funny because their wives eventually become on board because there's a new system now and it's working better and they see it, but it takes time. And so their wives will often say, hey, what would your Iron Council guys say about that? Or, hey, don't you have a meeting tonight at 6? You need to be there on that meeting. What are you doing? And they will start to support the growth in their men, but it takes time because everything else is a threat.
It's scary, right? I mean, I think for any of us, like growth and evolution, especially of the other partner, can be really scary because we don't know how that's going to impact us, positive or negative. And once we start to see positive change, then we can like be a little safer feeling. We can let our guard down and we can lean into it a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, Vanessa, this has been great. I want to be respectful of your time. You've got your book, The Motherhood Myth, and this has been really good. I'm glad that we did this. I've been looking forward to it and wondered how it would go, but I think we're very much aligned with what we talked about today. So will you please let everybody know how to follow you, connect with you, learn more about your book, and grow as men, women, and couples?
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate you having me on. And I think you're right. I mean, there's way more overlap than there is the opposite. And I think that right there is kind of the crux of so many of these conversations, right? It's like we're more alike than we are not. And so, yeah, this book, I say, even though it's through the lens of motherhood, I've had actually a lot of men. I was actually putting together a post recently, reach out to me and say, I just want to let you know I read this book and it's been profoundly helpful in my relationship. So I appreciate you writing it. So that was my hope for it, right? Is that to your point, it would be a couples coming together, not just about women and mothers. So the book's out wide, Motherhood Myth. You can find me on my website, vanessabennet.com, or mostly Instagram, Vanessa S. Bennett.
Great. We'll sync it all up. I appreciate you, Ryan. And really looking forward to getting this information out to the guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate you.